Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this final uh, pre-concluding session, I would say, valedictory, because after that we have a small vote of thanks that Indrani is going to lead. So let me start by first welcoming Ms. Nisaba Godrej, Executive Chairperson, Godrej Consumer Products Limited, for this valedictory session in the form of fireside chat. In fact, like most of the experiential facets of our lives, just like this conclave, which has reframed which has got completely reframed by the pandemic, even this fireside chat is going to be virtual. Ms. Godrej and I are connected virtually with one another from different physical locations while being in the same city, just like we are connected with all of you on this unified virtual platform from multiple locations. But I'm going to promise you this one thing, that despite being virtual, the disarming grace, enormous elegance, and the towering inspiration of Ms. Godrej is surely going to fire up the constructive energy fields of all the leaders and HR professionals attending the conclave. Ms. Nisaba Adi Nisa Godrej, her personal life and professional journey has truly been remarkable. A heady, soulful, and a steely mix of head, heart, and courage. And what better way to conclude this conclave by learning from her experiences and insights in each of these vectors in her life. Now, I don't know how many of you know, but from braving to overcome depression in her early 20s to leading Godrej Agrovet turnaround story in her early 30s to envisioning an exemplary sustainability agenda for the group for many years now, to overseeing innovation, strategy, HR for Godrej Industries, to presiding over as a chairperson of Godrej Consumer Products. She today is leading the group to becoming an iconic global company worthy of its tall standing and exponential ascent in the newly dawning post-COVID world. Now, in addition to her being the chief architect of GCPL's strategy and transformation over the last decade, she's also the chairperson for Teach for India and sits on the board of Godrej Agrovet, Bharti Airtel, Mahindra & Mahindra, and VIP Industries. She has a BSc degree from the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania and MBA from Harvard Business School. She's very passionate about now, keep counting, education, human mind, trekking, equestrian sports. She lives in Mumbai with the children Zoran and Aiden. We at CII, ma'am, are truly privileged and honored to have you share your perspectives, insights, learnings, and experiences for this valedictory session today, which is actually on the conclave theme. And the conclave theme was to power growth, but lead with head, heart, and courage. So thank you, ma'am, for being with us.
Thank you, Sanjay. And please call me Nisa.
Yes.
And I'm definitely going to ask for a snippet of this introduction and recording because I think it's the nicest thing anyone's ever said. And whenever I'm falling flat on my face, I'm going to watch it and feel better about myself.
I think
but
richly,
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
No, it's been such an honor to research your life as I was preparing for this session. So ma'am, Nisa, we've had a very productive conclave over the last 2 days, and we've come almost to the end of it now. And within the plethora of enriching insights and constructive ideas, which we've been able to assimilate to push the envelope on leadership in HR, what has emerged very strongly and as unified theme is that the new leader and the leadership models will need to transcend from the largely left brain oriented, headstrong, problem solving kind of leaders that we used to value to today. And they've been very successful in a way. So let's not take away the fact that, that's the kind of a model of leader which has really got us where we are, and it's extremely successful. But today, moving to a rich blend of head, heart, and courage, actually with the latter two, which is the heart and the courage, not just good to have, but must-haves, in a leader. Mm-hmm. And heart basically about demonstrating the compassion, not just about physical safety of our employees, but also not just about even emotional well-being of employees, but also mental well-being of our employees, especially in the back of COVID. And I'll come a little more detail in one of my probes to you later. And courage for meaningful integration of diversity, inclusion, and sustainability beyond the growth agenda that we all are used to, actually integrating it with the company vision, mission, and purpose. Now, those are the models that are very strongly emerging, and that's the theme that has been emerging today. Now, Godrej, and this is my first question, ma'am, to you, and I want to hear your perspective. Godrej is entering its 125th year at this time of unprecedented global change. Now, over the last year, you have often mentioned that you see this period as a second beginning of Godrej. Now, to set the tone for our discussion ahead, I urge you to indulge us with this Godrej 2.0 vision of yours.
Sure. So Sanjay, I think, one of the facts about Godrej is that we were founded in a crisis. We were founded in 1897 during India's freedom movement. And the context in which we were founded was the Swadeshi movement, the original sort of make in India. And most of Godrej's profits to start off at the time went to the freedom, to the Tilak Fund, actually. We first made soap during the Spanish flu. And at all these periods, actually, what we did was not just, there was a bigger purpose, but there was also innovation. So in the freedom movement, actually, we had products. Our founder, Deshal Godrej, actually failed a few times before he succeeded with what is known as the Godrej lock. And it succeeded. It had a patent at the time because it didn't have levers inside it. And it actually succeeded because the British locks would rust in our humid weather. So that was the innovation then. The soaps, we were one of the world's first to manufacture mass soap using vegetable oil versus animal fat. And you can understand in a country like India with religious sentiment, how that sort of, so you can actually look at crisis. You can be a deer in headlight and say, oh God, what's going to happen? Or you can say that, this pandemic is, I hope, a once in 100-year moment for all of us living through it. It's going to create a seismic shift. It's going to make some trends go faster. It's going to open up a lot of innovation. So a lot of things are going to change around it. So I think when we looked at it, there were two parts to it. I think one is the short term, correct? During COVID, and I remember very early on in the pandemic, we said, if anything, we want to be remembered well and remembered for our values during this time. We will protect jobs. We'll do whatever we can as an organization, sort of to stand by our people, customers, and communities. And Sanjay, my father used to always say this: is that values are fantastic, correct? But they don't really matter unless you can live them during hard times, when you have hard choices to make. I think fortunately for our types of business, we weren't hit by very tough choices in terms of, what to do. But I think that was very much that, this isn't second beginning, but we want to be remembered well. I think the piece that we're seeing now, whether it's pandemic, climate change, we're seeing a lot of inequity and people sort of rising up against it. I think we will need to travel lightly to travel far, correct? And businesses, I always say that our values should stay the same, but your business should change every 5 years. I think right now is like one of those moments where you have to sort of have zero-based thinking. And what we thought was not possible, suddenly our minds have been opened up to it, correct? I mean, there are lots of, I'm assuming, HR leaders here. If someone had told you 3 years ago, chalo, let's do, flexibility is the right thing. Let's do this experiment where everyone will work from home. It would have, necessity is the mother of invention. Or what happened with vaccines, correct? When human beings need to do something, we're incredible. So I think if you say that there's going to be a big shift and a lot of innovation is possible, if you marry those two, you can really have a second beginning. And for example, the pandemic will accelerate the need for health for sustainability. Digital is already happening, and we'll have to adapt. And I think it's, when I think about India, you can decouple growth, economic growth from coal. We know it's possible, correct? We've already done some parts of it. So I think in the same way across our product portfolios, how do you deliver more health, more digitally, with a lower footprint, correct? So I think these are some of the emerging questions, and we see the answers very quickly, and especially if we don't do copy and paste from the West, correct? This is a great time for innovation, but especially in developing markets, correct? We don't have to build the kind of coal infrastructure and then pull it back, correct? We can just, it's like landline to mobile. Perfect. So I think when I think of second beginning, at least in my mind, the debate is not growth or sustainability, growth or equity. It's very much and, correct? And that and is driven by innovation. So that's why I really think this is that we need to look at this as a second beginning and have a lot of zero-based thinking around what we need to do next.
That's beautifully, I think, put. So Nisa, I love that point you made, that even for Godrej to succeed, it had to put lever inside it. Yeah? So, so I think the levers inside a Godrej is what makes Godrej.
We didn't have the levers.
No,
we didn't have the levers. So yeah.
Okay. And I think the point about values and character of an organization actually getting tested in the tough times, I think these are very, very good messages, I think, for all of us to really imbibe. Now, even beyond the context of pandemic that you just narrated, in fact, pandemic, of course, has accelerated, as you rightly said, exponentially everything. But even beyond that context, Nisa, the speed of change, the type of change, the complexity of the challenges that faced by Godrej, all organizations across all industries, has been increasing exponentially for some time now. Let's take a decadal context, for example. Now, you've been on record to say that leadership and decision-making in a crisis must be distributed. Yeah, I just want to come on that shared leadership. This resonates very strongly, actually, with that evolving model. And over last 2 days, we've also heard a lot about shared leadership. Something which you in Godrej have believed in, and you've set the tone by bringing in professional leaders to work in tandem with the promoter leadership.
Now,
it's this model. But this model actually fundamentally challenges the long-held belief of, which is reasonably successful model of singular ownership, accountability, command and control hierarchy. This goes actually, it's kind of anti-grain to that. Now, the earlier models of singular leadership, single decision-making authority provided for a lot of clarity of vision, focused execution, our ability to monitor and track and reward processes. And it's been successful, even in Godrej as much as in many other companies. Now, in the new model of shared distribution, what beliefs or long-held, it's kind of how do you create an environment for this to thrive, this new concept? Because a lot of long-held assumptions need to be completely reset. Yeah, a lot of stakeholders are going to challenge you. What would you say no to? What would you stop doing? How do you create additional space to grow even bigger in the 2.0 that you talked about, or go faster? And I just want you to be, in sum, really paint us the picture as eloquently as you really did the future Godrej for us. Let's say you said this is Godrej 2.0 for you. Could you paint us a Godrej leader 2.0 now, in this context for us?
Yeah, so I think, when I talked about distributed leadership during COVID, I actually meant distributed till the front line. And the thing is, in a crisis, if you assume that the leader at the top has the answers when they've never lived through a pandemic or any other thing, even remotely like this, then that leader is either doing drugs or something else that they should not be. And I think what we sort of learned was that you have to give, your sort of purpose and your values. That's what matters. And then let people make decisions on their, sorry, just 1 minute. There's this thing on my computer that's happening. Sorry. My apologies for that, Sanjay.
Oh, please.
Yes, sorry, no, there's just someone was ringing me on the thing. So I think what we felt was that actually it's, the front line, because there was just, you didn't know what the government was doing, what was happening, each country is different. And I remember so we really just pushed decision making as far as we went, while saying you have to keep people safe. Here are the budgets for that. That was a big focus for us. But salespeople themselves can decide whether they're going to go to market or not. Obviously, not in the big lockdowns and all where we sort of told people, but we gave people a lot of authority to do what they needed to do, correct? We needed to get soap to people. We needed to get mosquito repellent to people. We needed to serve our consumers, but we needed to let people locally sort of take decisions. And I remember one of our competitors, a multinational, calling one of our CEOs and saying, we're not operating because we've been told by headquarters abroad not to operate. So now we're focused on rearranging furniture in the offices. This is now 18 months ago when no one was ever going back to the office then, correct? So you can see the power of distributed leadership. I think, I love this Reed Hastings books, No Rules, Rules. And he talks a lot about this sort of, if you have very high talent density and, your purpose, values, and focus, then you can just really let people free, because that freedom lets innovation happen. I think the models that we're talking, the hierarchical models, are very good when change is not as fast, correct? And you need consistency. So, I wouldn't maybe suggest too much distributed leadership in, areas where there's no room for failure, correct? Like an airline pilot, you might not want them to be very innovative.
Very
You might
valid.
want them to have psychological safety so they can speak up.
Yeah.
So I think depending on what your what type of organization or the speed you need to move ahead with, I think this idea of distributed leadership is very powerful. And I think the other thing that we really learned during the pandemic, because this need to digitize and, the ability for us to be talking to people all over the world, we had it before the pandemic. We just didn't use it as much, correct? So I think even with Frontline now, say with people who work with us, almost on a daily basis, you're getting mood scorecards on how they're feeling.
Wow.
And then we launched this app called Emerge Stronger, where we were pinging people with sort of questions, about, what should we do here? What should we do about the business? What's happening with COVID? So I think that ability also now through digital platforms to be in constant touch with your frontline and get that feedback is quite powerful.
No, it sure is. In fact, so having seen Nisa now, Godrej 2.0 is going to be about strong values, continuing, sustaining, investing further in our values, and you said long term also to make sure that innovation becomes the pivot on which the company continues to grow, while having the diversity, sustainability, inclusive agendas that you talked about, and then Godrej Leadership 2.0. And I do appreciate your saying that when we got pushed into the crisis, we gave the mosquito repellent to the front end team and said, do what you have to do with it. Reach
just
the
get
customer.
Get it to the customer.
Yeah. So it's kind of in a normal environment, this would have been seen as a loss of control, and 10 more people would want to take a decision in the value chain on that mosquito repellent. But maybe I think, as you said, crisis becomes the engine for transformation of these things and pushes that a little ahead. So in the climate that the Godrej 2.0 and the Godrej leaders, so let's say G2.0 and GL 2.0, Godrej leader 2.0, let's talk about the environment that you're getting into in a bit. And in the context of evolving technologies we talked about, a lot of new businesses and business models, including the D2C, which has become a buzzword today, or digital first, And then you top it up with the pandemic-infused structural shifts, tectonic shifts that we all are seeing. Now, there are some things to the human mind, it all comes together with a blinding speed, and we end up, it gets very difficult to see what is temporary and what is transformative, what is there to stay and what is just going to come and go by. And you
Yeah.
don't want to take a decision trading off one versus another, where you take a permanent decision on a temporary trend and not take a decision on a transformative trend. We've talked about hybrid over the last 2 days. It's still evolving. Nobody really has an answer, and it's understandable. It'll take time for this to settle down. As you rightly said, different industries will evolve differently. There was a talk about 4-day week now in very large part of the world, saying why is 6-day week or 5-day week a holy cow? Why can't it be 4-day week? And online shopping, a lot of people, about a fifth of the world, came first time actually transacting online because of the COVID. It got pushed into, but how many are going to go back? In differential industries, there are differential kind of people who are going to go back to their old habits. Unlikely that many will. Even the non-work aspects. In fact, I had started seeing masks, and all of us have been traveling. I've seen masks, especially in East Asian countries, from air quality perspective in a very lot of cities. Now, are masks here to stay beyond the air quality issues? The virtual birthdays we have celebrated, the weddings we've been celebrating. So a lot of these trends, suddenly, which were not there, have started, and I don't know how many of them are transformative, how many are temporary really there. So my question to you really is this about the environment in which your G2.0 or GL2.0 is really getting in now. Now, how should the leaders envisage this new emerging economy, but more importantly, capture the exponential value potential? Because there is a massive upside in this economy that we are getting into, in the underbelly of some of these ongoing transformations. So I personally believe, Nisa, that if we can get onto the right transformative changes early and smartly, and learn to navigate at a multiple levels this ambiguity, there is a pot of gold at the end of this thing, and not just in terms of economy, but in terms of the upliftment of communities and the stakeholders there. So how would you guide us? How do we pick and choose between temporary, transformative? How do we capture this exponential value?
I think, Sanjay, one thing I'll just start off with that. And, I know this is not the topic, but I think one thing we do have to realize is that there is a lot of change happening, but there's a big haves and have-nots also happening in terms of inequity.
Perfect.
And sometimes the stock market has no correlation to what's happening, whether it's with companies or reality on the ground. And then you think of things like climate change, it is going to disrupt the poor much more than it does the rich, correct? And eventually these are also, so we have to look at both the social and the economic together. So I think companies do need to keep an eye on that and see what they can do and where they can contribute, and be sensitive to that going on. I think, I'll start off by saying that, when you think of all this disruption, you must also be thinking about, obviously, what is my purpose? What is my business? What is my consumer doing? And what are they saying to me? Because you need to discern the noise from the truth, correct? Especially when we come to conferences like this, there'll be a lot of stuff thrown around. So you have to be able to discern business model and valuation, correct? And sometimes they're not fully tied in together. That being said, obviously none of us want to be the next Kodak, where we had the technology actually even sitting in the company, and we missed what consumers were doing. So I think this is a tricky balance for businesses to handle, because you have your core. Like if I think about consumer goods, my core is still the Kirana store, correct? But there's omni-channel, there's also modern trade, there's also e-commerce. There are now brands going directly to the consumer, while you still have to do for your core television advertising. And you still have to manage a P&L. So how much do you put in terms of investment sort of going forward? So I think one thing to remember is that because you are high ability in certain areas, doesn't mean that your high ability, say this digital revolution is definitely here. And it's not just consumer facing. I mean, it's even cost to serve, correct? If so many things are getting automated and your competitors or new competitors coming, their cost to serve is lower than yours, you're not going to have a
Correct.
sort of business
Correct.
business model. So I do think like leaders need that time to breathe, to read, to meet people, to talk, and to be building up their team. So one of the things I was most I recently joined this Bharti Airtel board, correct? And from the outside, they seem like a telecom company, but like when you speak to them from the inside, it seems like, what you think of a Google or a, because they have these huge engineering teams and they've, built this up over the last 4 or 5 years. So I think companies are really going to need to think about what is their business model, how do these technologies change consumers, where consumers are, or their willingness to pay or cost to serve. And then do you have the teams within who can help you pivot your business? And I think from a HR, from a people perspective, this is going to be a big challenge for us as we need to build, because we all want to build and buy digital talent at pretty much the same time. I think everyone's facing that this talent is scarce. They have higher attrition and they cost a lot of more, and your core organization is complaining about them. But if you don't do this shift, I think it's going to be a big challenge. I think shorter term disruptions like inflation and supply chain are shorter term, and I think we're learning and we'll adapt from them. But I think who's your chief product technology officer and what does their team look like is going to become pretty critical to pretty much every business.
That's very specific, I think, important. So what I heard, and I just want to reframe this in my mind again so I get it perfectly right. You're saying digital is of course here to stay, and we've talked about it. But you're saying that keep watch on that the marginal cost of creating demand and marginal cost of supplying, which is serving the demand, is going down. And if you don't get that maths right, you could be in for a surprise, even if you're in the right kind of a segment.
Yeah, and
or whatever.
You need to look at your business model, correct? I mean, B2C might not work on the bar of soap. I mean, I might be wrong, but the economic model might not make full sense, correct? So some of these models will get shaken out. Some will work. But digital is not just your front end model, correct? It's your whole chain is changing now. So, I mean, when we think of HR, are you fully digitized or not now? And your employee experience really depends on that. So does your cost depend on that, correct? So I think we need to look at it from all points of view.
So, and then from the HR perspective, I think what stood out is you're very strongly saying that treat the technology acumen as important as your profit target, because this is here. So get the right, your point about product officer and technology, and I think some of these things.
So I think as a CEO, you'll have to decide how many engineers you're going to invest in, because this is future forward.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it, you're going to. So I think that's the nuance in each business, and and I think as leaders, like what I said, you might be high ability in many things, but if you are not high ability in digital, then make sure you have someone on that table with you who definitely is.
Okay, so I think let's move to another point where you mentioned, I think in every single question, very strong theme, and over the last 2 days, this theme of sustainability, that is really something which has resonated very strongly in whatever session we've done. It's just that the cuts of the sustainability are very, very different. And I'll come to that. And you did talk about, and we all know that Godrej has always been a very purpose-driven company and has contributed immensely to the nation building. I don't know if many of us know, but I just want to tell all the attendees that Godrej's integral role in India's fight for freedom has been to an extent where the company actually contributed profits every year to support the cause. So it's like that meaningful, where you actually put your skin in the game there.
Although you're only as good as what you do next. So unfortunately, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. But I think
to be forward-looking.
I think those values do transcend, as you rightly said, the whole a matter of pride for the first vegetable soap, oil soap done by Godrej, about 100 odd years back. Now, you in Godrej have had the stated policy and measurable metrics, so to help that address the social part of it, the environmental part of it, the economic needs of the marginalized and underprivileged section of communities. You've had those measurable targets, yeah. But as we now navigate the impact of this ongoing pandemic, it's not just those. There are many curves that we need to flatten, including the inequity you talked about, social inequity, climate change, of course. Now, yesterday we had Nitin Pranjpe doing our keynote address when we started it, and we concluding with you today. And Nitin also mentioned that while we have successfully captured at least the imagination of humanity on the E of sustainability, which is the environment part of sustainability, he said that we have failed to do so in the S of sustainability, which is social inequity today. And that's the missing piece. And from Indian context, possibly the most needed one, a much needed one. The whole aspect about employability and future of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the general haves becoming super haves and have nots becoming worse of have nots. So how do you really bridge that? So in context of that, I just want you to take this head on now for me and for the audience. How does Godrej plan to, because there are contracting forces at times, plan to capture growth while tackle these emerging challenges and sustaining the thrust on social inequity you talked about, greener planet. So is it about saying, okay, I'll make money and I'll keep investing on the other side? How do you balance this multi-stakeholder interest along with your profit? How do you plan to do that?
So Sanjay, I actually think it's not a either or, but an and, correct? And I think you can move, and I'm not just saying it because, it's easy to say it in these conferences and then you can go back and do whatever you do.
It's not surprising. Many leaders have said that.
I think and how do you go from the do no harm to do good? So how do we think about that, correct? And I mentioned about how can India grow while shifting to renewables without, without further sort of doubling down on coal. And we've actually, on some of our renewable goals, we've met them ahead of target. We know there's a global shift happening in manufacturing, correct? China's got more expensive. There's this whole thing going on with the China-US thing. So you think if you can shift to renewables more for manufacturing, you can have a bigger green exports base also, correct? So you can see that our percentage of exports to GDP can go up, and that's just going to help with jobs. It's going to help with a whole host of things. So there is this idea of the virtuous green cycle. I think there's also the ability to deliver. And then you think of emerging markets, correct? I'm coming back to this idea, at least, in consumer products, we operate in India, in lots of countries in Africa, Indonesia. And, if I think about our Western model, correct, of how we're talking about sustainability, is that we've spent millions and millions of dollars of putting sugar in plastic bottles and say, then I'm doing good or no harm or doing better by cutting down sugar and cutting down plastic. But what if we, in a lot of these developing countries, we're very, very early stages of penetration in certain categories. So how do we think, and it's not about denying people the good things in life, correct? Or denying, but how do we build these categories more sustainability, correct? How do we think on first principles of what we are selling to consumers? And it is possible. And the thing in India or emerging markets, because we have to sell high quality at low prices, we are already cutting out a lot of stuff that's not needed, correct? So how do we do more? For example, we sell a hand wash where we sell the powder and you mix it with the water. So you're cutting down boxes, you're cutting down plastic, you're cutting down transporting water, correct? We sell the same mosquito repellent, and we obviously sell it in aerosol cans, but we also sell the same active in a piece of paper, correct? For 1 rupee. So I think actually, and the margins on all these products are very good. So I do think there's an innovation solve for both accessibility and the green premium. So that's the and, correct? It's like, and renewables could be a huge opportunity for India to drive economic growth if we don't get stuck with this idea that yes, coal is cheapest right now, but there's a lot of things that we can think of innovatively, to sort of, so I think that's really,
very powerful, very powerful.
really important.
No, I see the power. Yeah, go ahead.
And Sanjay, inequity is increasing, and there's a lot of intersectionality in inequity, correct? And I think at least my learning is, so Godrej has done some amount of work on LGBTQ in the last decade. And really it's all happened because, we had someone called Parmesh Shahani whose seat was at the table. So I think our heart was in the right place, but you need someone, like I said, you need that digital person at the table. If you are trying to solve for any of these issues, you need senior people who understand the issues, who have empathy with the issues, and who are advocating for the issue. And again, I think, I think this sort of what Godrej's work has been there is not just good from a social justice point of view, but it's good from a business point of view also, because you're opening yourself up to bigger talent pools. I think we'll just have to think of how do we create equity and access for people from different talent pools, correct? And if we're all just going to the IIMs or these top 50 business schools without opening our eyes, then that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And there, I think collaboration, whether it's CII, whether it's, I think I'm a great admirer of IBM. They've been 100 years ahead in some of these journeys, whether it's on women or LGBTQ.
True.
So, we should look to others. And one last point, Sanjay, is this idea of what is our true self versus our best self. So we come to conferences like this, you give this wonderful introduction to me, and we only talk about what we do well, correct?
Yes,
we don't talk about enough about what we're struggling with. So I have the most women board members of any listed company in India. It's great, but my women attrition is higher. I don't have bias in pay and promotion for women, but I have a lot of bias in our 360-degree forms. And I'm struggling in terms of women leadership in India, correct? And we need to have these conversations openly so we can learn from each other. So these would be some of my thoughts on how we think about.
I'd like to compliment, and it's so refreshing to see that candor that you bring into this topic. And I see a very strong, the conviction that is there with and being the real adjunct between the real this thing between the two rather than the or. And I think this is again a common theme which has been coming. I like your point about you saying that don't get too closeted in your too many I's in IIT and IIM. There are already so many I's there. So need to come out of that and possibly look at we as a concept instead of I as a concept. In fact, CII also has two I's in that. So I think we need to make it CVV now so that we become a little more inclusive there. Now, coming to this, moving to this talent piece there, and you talked a lot about the kind of new mix of talent that is required, diversity, inclusion, and the talent there. Now, more than ever now, I think we all are thinking hard about where and why we work. In fact, there is this whole talk about this period of great resignation, and all the numbers have been thrown over the last 6 months to 12 months as to how many people have left in different walks of life in India, world over. And this whole talent war, and I've been party to this myself in the industry now that I represent, which is software. It's so difficult to get talent, and people are just don't want to move back. They've got comfort of working from their homes, in their hometowns. They don't want to come back to this, horrid life, possibly commuting in Bombay. And there are some serious business implications of this talent war which is going on now, especially these millennials and the newly grown-ups, which is going to be about 2/3 of the workforce very, very soon. They all are reframing their life purpose much beyond the conventional work regimes, at least that I have been personally associated with the last 2.5, 3 decades now. They're stating that man does not live by the bread alone. In fact, that's the kind of larger, concept that we are seeing. In fact, a few are, and then what to some extent, it made me anxious that a few of them are arguing that it's not a great resignation, it's a great celebration. Now, do you see this as an inherent risk of such profound shift of the raw talent into raw young talent, high energy talent, into areas of non-accretive economic spheres? You know, people are taking sabbaticals. People are saying, why do I need to work when I can just, pursue my passion, live in Goa and just do 2 scripts a day and kind of earn enough for me to live. Now, all that was being put to run this massive economic engine of this, planet. And suddenly it seems to be now kind of, in a way, dissipating. Or simply even within the company, do you see this as a dilution in employee motivation and commitment? Because if people are going to say, okay, give me 3 days to work from home, I will work at my terms. How do you mitigate it? How do organizations plan for future of work with this level of change and this talent wars that are happening? How do you see that?
Yeah, so I think, I think a lot of the shift in how we work has happened. So I think if anyone wants to hold on to the very old ways of working, good luck. Good luck to them, because I don't think it's going to work. I think there is a short-term sort of, COVID, people did not leave organizations. We also attrition at a very low. But now there is that built-up attrition happening. The job market, especially in India, is quite hot with all these startups, flush with money. So we're seeing that happening. And you're also seeing what happens with location agnostic. I had a very good, actually, HR professional come to say bye to me the other day. Her name's Sneha. And I was like, oh, so I heard you're going to Amazon and you're moving to Singapore. So she said, no, I'm working with the Seattle team out of Bombay only. So, so
Yeah.
like you can now go to Amazon Seattle, but you don't, you can do it out of, Mumbai. So I think there's some of those short-term trends happening. I think there is a certain level of burnout, lack of connection to the organizations, leaders, managers not being able to create that feeling of connection, feeling of purpose, especially online. It becomes harder. And there are people leaving without jobs, some deciding to do part-time. We know there's been some amount of women exodus. You read a lot about it in the US to do childcare, because that's not so. Again, I think not all we can do, but I think the thing to really keep in mind is that, what is your purpose? Do your employees, do people who work with you understand that clearly? Do they feel connected to it? Do they seem seen as human beings? And, when you sort of spoke in the beginning, we talked about, more heart and more just being human, given what we've all sort of been through. And, I've worked with Teach for India for a decade now. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, they said, we're going to add love as one of our values. And this is an organization that works with children, correct? And I was like, how can you use the word love in the context? I mean, this is with children. And I think I've learned so much on being on that working on a non-profit board and working with non-profits, because purpose is so central to it, correct? Teach for India was hit very badly during the Me Too movement, something that I don't think many of us were expecting, like a non-profit with, women is 80% leadership, 70% of fellows are women, and this was sort of happening. And they were really, I think, able to build up back again because of the humility, because of this purpose, because of these very human values. And I know in corporate, it used to make me feel very uncomfortable, but I've realized what that power is. So I know as we automate more things and we digitize more things, how do we keep that human touch? How do we train our leaders to have humility, to ask people how they're doing, and to actually have the flexibility to care for people in the way they need to? And I think this I do think having a hybrid work model is good, having some connect, seeing people. We are social beings, but please design that, with the 20-year-olds in your organization. Don't let all the 55-year-old men design how, have that done collaboratively, make sure those people are on the table, and you are going to have to give people richer jobs, with a lot of learning, and let them do it. Let them do it from where they want to do it. Correct. Don't go back to the old ways.
So where we started, I think you did mention this, that we started with heart, and let me just, this is the last question. We're just about getting over the time, and I just don't want to miss this opportunity now that we have you, and end this question about the heart again. Now, we all know that, the whole nature of the work, all the assumptions, everything has gone out the window, and employees too have shared the sense of disruption now. But till now, most of the companies have been focused on physical safety of the essential workers, employees, because that was obviously the priority, and they've done exceedingly well. One has to compliment the fraternity sitting here and outside, extended families, that we've done reasonably well. The focus in this regard was to formulate new policies, procedures, security, protective equipment, so that people can work safely. However, Nisa, with the prolonged continuation of pandemic, when it started, we thought 3 months, 6 months, something like that. But it's been now almost 2 years. And the harsher phase, which none of us predicted, which is the COVID-2 in April this year, the baseline for emotional health has seriously shifted downwards. And we all know our families, friends, very, very close ones have got impacted, kind of WhatsApp groups, communities, and all those incidents that we all are party to, where somebody that you probably met yesterday is going through this whole turmoil. Now, there was a recent survey done by Oracle, and I want to just give you the numbers just to bring you to kind of, to appreciate the gravity of this. This was done in 15,000 people across the world, of which 1,100 were Indian respondents. And they said, are you impacted significantly by pandemic? In the world, 8 out of 10 people said, but in India, 91% people said they were significantly impacted by pandemic. 50%, nearly a little under 50% said they're struggling financially. And 36% said that they were suffering from mental health issues. Now, the global average is under 30. In India, it was 36%, which is quite a startling. 1 in 3 people are suffering from. Now, to get this fact out of the closet itself is such a courage and a brave thing, to claim that I am going through a mental health issue. And I would say that it's an underpitched number. It could actually be higher, maybe 1 in 2 it would be, because, Indian cultural things don't let you do that. Now, we all know that there was a crucial phase, Nisa, in your life too. And you were brave enough to confront it and overcome the mental anxiety you were going through at that point of time. So this is really the last one I want to ask you. How are you helping your leaders to get comfortable, or your employees to get comfortable with checking this whole emotional? I saw that you talked about these mood monitors. How are you feeling today? The apps that you've launched, all these things you're doing. I heard that you say that. And really sum it up, because it's largely HR fraternity there. What is the role of HR today when it comes to this, in terms of building new org work talent models, or this thing? Just sum it up with that, so that we take that message back with us. So honestly, last
so
question.
I think on this, Godrej is only as healthy as the people in it, correct? So both your physical health and your mental health is sort of extremely important in any organization. So I think one, as you said, Sanjay, is having depression or anxiety is like having diabetes, correct? So just let's make it as simple as that. We're not embarrassed about diabetes. We go to the doctor, we get insulin, we eat a bit less sugar, we figure it out. It's the same thing with any of these things. The problem in India, like you said, is culturally, I think we have astrologers instead of therapists and all that going on, but I won't get into it. I think as an organization, what you can do is a couple of things. One is making sure you have these platforms in mental wellness. You have help. We offer help to all Godrejites and their family, making sure they have access to counseling, online tools, and creating these sort of supportive ways of working from home context. So I think that's one big piece, that you have to have the tools available. The second piece is having leadership. I mean, we know people don't leave an organization, they leave their manager, they leave the person they're sort of reporting to. And now you have this, people leading online in a place where people have this emotional thing sort of going on. So this sensitivity of leaders during this time and your ability to set the tone and make sure that they're, learning how to lead online and to be sensitive to people is very important. And I think what we've done is we've had a lot of open conversations. What is mental health? Lots of people go through it. What can you do about it? So we try to be as, make sure that we talk about it like we talk about diabetes, correct? And there's nothing to hide. And I think senior leaders also have to walk the talk. So one is that you have to be open if you've had any struggles, but also on this work-life balance, you have to walk the talk and show people how it can be sort of done, correct? If you're the one actually creating the mental problems, it's not going to, it's not going to.
No, I'm so glad that we had this conversation because you really set the bar high, and you yourself are a most authentic representation. And I started by making a promise to the audience: your disarming grace and enormous elegance and the towering inspiration. I think you left us with enough of all those three, and enough of head, heart, and courage, and the conviction with which it comes: head and heart and courage. And it's not either or, and all the agendas, that the themes that we talked about. So thank you so much. We really are benefited. We really are inspired. We really look forward to all the very best for Godrej 2.0, the Godrej Leader 2.0, and all the specific themes that you are leading, ma'am. And we all want to continue to get inspired by you. Thank you so much for taking your time.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. So kind of you to have me. Thank you.
Thanks.